Hongyang Boming. Beautiful women will come to unhappy ends. Nowhere in history is this saying more apparent than in the lives of the four beauties of ancient China. These women changed the course of history and were known to be the most beautiful women who ever lived. Tales of their loveliness can only be rivaled by the difficult and, too often, tragic lives they led. First came the radiant Xi Shi, a woman so lovely that it is said that the fish would forget how to swim when she drew near. Second, the fair Jiao Chen, a woman so pale and luminescent that it is said that the very moon would shy away before her loveliness. Third, the gentle Wang Zhaojin, a woman so beautiful and fair that it is said that her appearance caused birds to fall from the heavens. And fourth, the famed Leslie Jones, who was so exceptional looking that even gay men got turned on when she was around. Oh, I thought that these ancient Chinese stories were a little bit too ethnically homogenous, so I thought I'd shake things up and make it more diverse. Yeah, I mean, come on. The four most beautiful women in ancient China? They can't all be Chinese, that's racist.
Alright, so on to the actually semi-substantial part of this video. I wanted to talk about Game of Thrones. I know I'm gonna get a lot of YouTube trolls telling me that it doesn't matter, it's just a show, blah 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 blah, but I think it would be foolish to think that the media that we consume, especially media as popular as Game of Thrones, where a large segment of the population is internalizing it and consuming it, I think it would be foolish to say that it doesn't affect us in some way.
Uh-oh. You know what time it is. It's time for everyone's favorite game show, Social Justice Bingo! For those of you playing at home, feel free to download the bingo sheet in the description below. Oh, don't forget to cover your safe space.
Popular media not only reflects current social values, but it also perpetuates them. Not only does it mirror society's norms and values, but it confirms them. It repeats them back to us, and it validates the things that we already believe to be true.
I agree with that. The media we consume does have an effect on how we think and feel. But from your tone, I'm guessing you find something objectionable about Game of Thrones. Do tell.
I find that whenever I talk about representation, I get lots of people saying that representation doesn't matter, why are you worrying about this, etc., etc. And I also find that typically, not always, but typically, the people saying things like this are widely represented in society.
Oh, I got one. Let's see. Check your privilege, and your privilege, therefore your argument is invalid.
I did a whole video about this subject a while back called Can Emma Stone Play an Asian Character? And I was much more eloquent there, so if you want to check that out for a more detailed discussion on representation, then you definitely should. So the reason that I've been thinking a lot about representation in Game of Thrones is because I've been staying with my family and both of my brothers love Game of Thrones. I love Game of Thrones. Most of my friends watch it. My boyfriend doesn't watch it because I don't understand him as a person.
A feminist that doesn't understand her own partner as a person.
But what I realized the other day is that there are more major characters in Game of Thrones that have red hair than there are Black or Asian characters.
That's because Game of Thrones takes place in medieval Europe, which is primarily white people.
And in case you were wondering, the population of Black and Asian people in the entire world is much, much, much larger than the population of redheads.
The key point here is the entire world, not just medieval Europe.
I think redheads are only like 2% of the population, so very insignificant, yet somehow they dominate a lot of Game of Thrones.
Oh, statistics. What's that? Yeah, redheads make up less than 2% of the population worldwide, that's true. But what you fail to realize is that the vast majority of redheads come from Europe. Specifically the British Isles. 28% of English people carry the gene for red hair. 10% of Irish people have red hair, with close to 40% carrying the gene. 6% of Scottish people have red hair, while 35% carry the gene, and 38% of Welsh people also carry. So if you're going to have redheads, this is definitely where you're going to find them. And, you know, When you think about it, redheads are only 2% of the population, so a social justice warrior like yourself, who believes in minority representation, should be pleased that such a rare minority is getting represented. But wait, I forgot. The rule only applies to white people. Carry on.
But I've also seen it in a lot of other like fiction. Harry Potter, the Weasleys, are an entire family of redheads, which I think is just genetically impossible.
What you just said is asinine. Ass being the operative word here. So, it takes 2 recessive red hair genes to produce a redheaded child. If one parent has red hair, and the other parent has a dominant color, like brown, then there is a 0% chance of a red child. If one parent has red hair and the other has brown hair, but that person also carries the recessive gene, then you have a 50% chance of a red hair child. Do you follow? But if both parents have red hair, then you have a 100% chance of having a child with red hair.
I don't really give a fuck about the accuracy of redhead representation. I'm more concerned about the lack of representation of people of color in fantasy, just in general.
Will someone please think of the brown people?
That's not to say that there are 0 people of color in fantasy or there's no people of color writing fantasy. I think Ursula Le Guin is a great example of this. I'm not disputing that there aren't important characters of color or authors of color who are making great contributions to the realm of fantasy.
Then why complain about it? If there are lots of authors out there representing minorities in their work, then what is the problem?
So when I did post on social media yesterday about Game of Thrones having more major characters with red hair than there were black people on the entire show, definitely pissed off some nerd boys. Gotta love those nerdy fanboys who feel the need to be gatekeepers against any sort of critique of the things they love.
Ad hominem attack. That's a space! How is complaining that there aren't enough people of color a viable critique of a TV show?
One of the main arguments I received is that Westeros, which is the main region in Game of Thrones that is explored, but it does occasionally diverge from that, is based on medieval Europe.
That's a pretty good argument. Game of Thrones is European. And you said it yourself, it occasionally diverges from that reason. So, again, what is your argument?
And something that I was talking about on the old Tumblr the other day, which I think is relevant to this discussion, was the idea of Watsonism versus Doyleism.
So, Doyleism versus Watsonism. Watsonism being a perspective on taking analysis from within a universe of the story, and Doyleism being the analysis based on the creator of the story and their motivation.
So when I talk about representation of Game of Thrones, but just in general, I'm not talking about, well, it only focuses on Europe and that's why there were no black people. I'm thinking of the motivations and the reasons and the potential biases that the author or the show creators might have had that would make them want to only focus on Europe and to only highlight white characters.
You know what? You are absolutely right. There is a problem with lack of representation in movies. The other day I was watching Ju-on with some buddies and it hit me. Where are all the white people? Seriously, don't the filmmakers know that white people make up less than 1% of the population in Japan? That makes them a minority. But I tell you, I did not see one cracker in the whole dang movie. Not one. Well, unless you count Kayako. She's kind of white in a corpsey Marilyn Manson kind of way. But let me tell you, if this is how white people are portrayed in Japanese movies, then Takashi Shimizu clearly has some internalized biases towards white people. You know what's going to happen? People. Japanese citizens are going to see this. They're going to internalize it. And then they're going to believe that all white people are blood-sucking yokai that will kill their hot people and take their jobs and pour soy sauce on the rice in public. And my buddy, Onigawara Yuki, came along and he said, dude, it's just a movie. It doesn't matter. But let's be honest, he's Japanese. He has no idea what it's like to be underrepresented in Japanese movies.
It's like when you read a history book in high school and you think, oh, well, we're only learning about Europe and America, so that's where all of the important historical events happened. When you're in high school, you have to take world history, and I remember that there was a whole chapter dedicated to World War II, which, not saying that World War II isn't important, but then there was only one chapter dedicated to the whole history of Asia.
And you know what? If you go to a Japanese school, you learn a ton about the rise of Buddhism in Japan. You learn about the wars to take over the north, and the various eras, differences politically, socially, religiously. You also learn a lot about their alliances with Great Britain, and how the emperor and the shogunate interplayed as far as power was concerned. And suspiciously little about the Second Sino-Japanese War. I can't believe we live in a world like this. It's almost as if everyone is ethnocentric, and every nation focuses only on the history that is relevant to them. Because it's, you guessed it, relevant to them. No, that's crazy.
So I think if you've only been taught history that is incredibly American or Eurocentric, then you're not going to realize all of the history that exists outside of that. And I do wonder if the Eurocentrism in a lot of historical books affected George R.R. Martin's decision to only focus on Europe. But he created this entire vast universe, and he knows the historical background for every area, every character, and he could have just maybe focused a little bit on, people of color, maybe just a tad.
Sweetheart. The creator of the show can focus on whatever part of the world he damn well pleases.
I feel like people will bend over backwards to defend problematic parts of series just because they love them.
Oh. Using the word problematic for something that isn't even an issue. Bingo!
Here she is. George, what do we got for her?
Couple of prizes, Danielle. First, this folding treadmill features 24 built-in speed and incline programs, plus a touchscreen with USB hookup from Avanti Fitness.
These are really nice.